Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, we are diving straight into things today because we're unpacking a real, modern-day mystery. We're talking about a case that completely stunned the nation, went cold for years, and was ultimately unlocked not by some sudden movie-style confession, but by the relentless evolution of science and just sheer stubborn persistence. We're looking at the Gilgo Beach investigation, and we're going to break down exactly how an impossible puzzle was painstakingly pieced together. Picture this. We're dropping right into the timeline on a bitterly cold December morning in 2010. Investigators had headed out to a desolate stretch of Long Island coastline. Just days before, what was supposed to be a pretty standard routine search turned into the shocking discovery of 4 women. Now that alone transformed this into one of the most disturbing criminal investigations in modern American history. But the reality? The detectives standing out on that freezing beach had absolutely no idea that the mystery was about to exponentially expand.
You know, right out of the gate, this terrifying realization hit the task force. As officers pushed further into the thick brush surrounding Gilgo Beach and Ocean Parkway, they found more human remains. And with every new discovery, this massive, unsettling question just hovered over everything they did. Were they hunting one single, highly prolific serial killer, or, at this isolated, quiet stretch of shoreline, simply become a convenient dumping ground for multiple, completely unrelated crimes spanning over many years?
Section 1. An impossible puzzle. The overwhelming scale of the investigation.
So, the scale of this thing? Detectives quickly realized the timeline stretched way beyond what anyone initially thought. Thousands. That's the number we're talking about here. The discovery has immediately expanded this into one of the largest investigations in New York State history. You had detectives from Suffolk County, the New York State Police, federal agencies. They all descended on this case. They conducted hundreds of interviews, but even more dauntingly, they cataloged thousands of pieces of evidence. We're talking cell phone records, financial transactions, thick stacks of missing person reports, fleeting vehicle sightings. They had actual mountains of data. Yet somehow it seemed to only produce more questions than answers.
And here's the catch, and it's a really frustrating one. There was a direct contrast between the massive amount of evidence collected and the actual technology of the era. Think back to the early 2010s, right? Many of these disappearances happened years prior, firmly in the pre-smartphone era. Today, our phones pinpoint our exact GPS coordinates 24/7. But back then, cell towers only gave these incredibly broad general locations. Reconstructing a timeline meant detectives literally had to physically look at paper billing records, cross-reference witness accounts, and map out a victim's last known communications by hand. It was a painstaking, manual slog. We're talking literal months of work just to map out a few days of activity.
And what's really chilling is that this technological blind spot was actively exploited. The killer's tactics were highly calculated. In one of the most haunting aspects of the early investigation, the killer actually used a victim's phone to make a series of disturbing calls to her family members. These weren't mistakes. These conversations were brief, and they were specifically designed to intimidate rather than offer any useful info. Crucially, authorities noted these calls appeared to originate from entirely different locations all across New York City. This showed a terrifying level of planning, a deliberate effort to create fear while perfectly understanding how to avoid staying in one place long enough to be tracked by that limited cell tower technology.
Section 2. The human toll. Families, pressure, and the noise.
Behind all those thousands of pieces of evidence and the frustratingly slow tech, there were real families experiencing unimaginable pressure. For the victims' families, time wasn't just some metric of an investigation. It was a heavy emotional weight. Birthdays, holidays, and anniversaries just became these painful reminders of unanswered questions. But year after year, some relatives courageously kept speaking out. They absolutely refused to let their loved ones simply fade into cold case files. And honestly, their sheer persistence is a massive part of why public attention remained glued to this investigation, even when official updates from law enforcement went completely silent.
But as you can imagine, all that public attention came with some severe complications. Detectives were basically fighting a multi-front war. Families were understandably asking why things were taking so long, reporters were scrutinizing every tiny development, and online, speculation and damaging rumors spread like wildfire, forcing investigators to literally plead with the public to distinguish verified facts from internet fiction. And to complicate things even further, internally, the investigation saw shifting leadership. Over the years, different officials took over, which meant teams constantly had to reorganize files, re-examine evidence, and dramatically shift their strategies.
Section 3. The technological breakthrough. Time becomes an asset.
Okay, so here's where the whole narrative flips. The biggest breakthrough didn't come from a dramatic interrogation room confession. By the late 2010s and early 2020s, forensic and digital science had completely revolutionized. The contrast is staggering. Hair evidence, trace materials, and electronic records that were essentially inconclusive dead ends back in 2010 could now be cracked wide open with advanced DNA extraction and modern digital tools. The analog frustrations of the past were completely replaced by absolute digital precision.
Let's walk through exactly how they applied this new tech, because it was done in these very deliberate, layered steps. First, they extracted biological evidence with far greater precision than was ever possible before. Second, they took all those old, dusty phone records and ran them through newly updated software and analytical databases. And third, they went back and cross-referenced old, seemingly minor witness accounts. For example, an old report of a vehicle sighting was reevaluated against deeply updated historical registration databases. Suddenly, what was a dead end years ago was blown wide open and became an incredibly hot lead. And this specific technique is what's known as building a digital mosaic. I think this is fascinating. Rather than banking everything on one single smoking gun, detectives took thousands of reanalyzed records, tips, and modern data points and just assembled them piece by piece. Every tiny fragment either strengthened or weakened a potential lead. And the real beauty of this digital approach, it's silent. Detectives could quietly follow these new paths without ever revealing their progress to the public. That ensured they didn't tip off any potential suspects while they built a case robust enough to withstand intense court scrutiny.
Now, a mosaic like that wouldn't be possible without a massive collaborative force. The old silos that usually plague long investigations, they were finally broken down. Agencies shared info efficiently, and they brought in hyper-specialists. You had experts in forensic genealogy, digital evidence analysis, behavioral analysis, and crime scene reconstruction, all pooling their expertise. It really proved that modern crime solving isn't about a lone wolf detective, it's about a highly coordinated, multidisciplinary team.
Section 4. Closing the net, from investigation to prosecution.
Moving from a sprawling investigation to a targeted prosecution, by the early 2020s, years of grueling patience, hidden surveillance, and meticulous evidence review finally aligned. The net closed on a single individual. Investigators believed they had identified someone whose specific background, physical movements, and alleged connections perfectly matched that massive digital and forensic mosaic they had assembled over more than a decade. The agonizing weight was finally shifting into a new phase, presenting undeniable science to the justice system.
Looking at the macro view of this timeline, it is just an incredible journey. From the chilling shock of that cold beach in 2010, through a literal decade of frustrating technological limits and public noise, right into the breakthrough era of the 2020s, where digital and forensic advances changed the game entirely. It's a profound testament to the tenacity of the investigators and, for sure, the unending resilience of the families who refused to let the victims be forgotten.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Seeing how completely technology transformed the Gilgo Beach puzzle, and knowing that digital forensics and DNA extraction continue to rapidly advance right now, how many other cold cases, sitting in filing cabinets around the world, are just one digital breakthrough away from finally being solved? Really makes you think, doesn't it? Thank you so much for exploring this with us today. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the data, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.